Hello, folks. Before we slip into tonight's darkness, tap like and subscribe. It keeps the nightmares coming. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time the shadows found you. Ready? Let's begin. I moved into my Nana's place 8 months after the funeral, mostly because the vacant Cape Cod on Hawthorne Street in Liberty, Missouri, deserved a heartbeat again. The clapboard siding had once been butter yellow, yet it had faded into the color of countertop butter left out overnight. Ivy slipped its fingers between cracked boards, and porch planks sighed whenever the wind leaned against them. Somewhere beneath the lavender soap smell, woven into the curtains, lingered the metallic breath of old radiator pipes. Letting the house wither felt like erasing Nana herself, so I packed a thrift store sofa, 2 suitcases of clothes, a half-grown monstera, and signed the deed over to my name. Most weekdays vanish inside Lakeside Animal Hospital at the edge of town. I back out of the gravel drive before sunrise, wedge into Highway 291 traffic, and return long after streetlights flicker on. Despite the long hours, the house welcomed me kindly at first. Floors creaked in predictable spots. Kitchen cabinets nudged themselves shut if I left them ajar. And deep within the walls ran a faint electronic hum I never managed to trace. It sounded almost like the place was breathing. The early oddities felt embarrassingly small. One Tuesday, I came home to find the upstairs hallway lamp blazing like a lighthouse. I blamed groggy morning habits and promised myself stronger coffee. 2 evenings later, the main floor bathroom mirror sweated with steam, beads of water gliding down as if someone had just stepped from the shower. The water heater sat on vacation mode, and the tile felt cool to my palm. I muttered about leaky pipes, opened every window, and watched lavender-scented curtains balloon outward. By Thursday, the cereal boxes in the pantry stood in a perfect row, labels squared, each nudged exactly 2 inches from the shelf edge. I live alone and am barely organized enough to match my socks, let alone stage breakfast like a catalog spread. That night, flashlight in hand, I marched room to room testing every deadbolt, sash lock, and warped laundry room latch. Each mechanism clacked shut without protest. I reminded myself that nerves lie. People misplace things, houses settle, and aging bones echo like footsteps. Yet feeling as if your home secretly employs a night manager is something else entirely. The tipping point arrived courtesy of Mrs. Whitaker, porch monarch of the house next door. 74, sharp as frost, she spends June afternoons under hanging ferns sipping sweet tea. On a bright Saturday, she lifted her mason-jarring greeting and called, "Thought you were working yesterday. Somebody was standing in your front bedroom window around 2 o'clock. My smile nodded. That room, once Nana's sewing nook, has served only as storage since I moved in. I thanked her, promised to investigate, and felt ice trickle down my spine. Late-day sun escorted me up the staircase, turning dust motes into tiny planets. The sewing room door sighed open. Everything sat exactly where I left it. Cedar chest against the west wall, quilting magazines stacked under a mannequin forever wearing an unfinished blouse. Then I noticed the lace curtain. A thumb-sized section had been pinched aside in a neat arc, perfectly positioned to watch the street. I never touched that fabric. When my fingers brushed the edge, warmth lingered, as if another hand had rested there moments earlier. A narrow shoe print dented the dusty pine boards, pointing toward the hallway. It ended beneath the attic hatch in the ceiling. The pull cord usually sways only when the air conditioner starts. Now it trembled as though someone had brushed past. Logic screamed retreat, but curiosity steered me to the kitchen for a step stool. The trapdoor groaned when I tugged the cord, powdering my shoulders with chalky dust. I climbed the ladder slowly, each rung releasing a weary creak. The attic swallowed neighborhood sounds, and thick air smelled of insulation and mothballs. When my eyes adjusted, a scene unfolded. A faded sleeping bag tucked behind plastic totes, an LED lantern, a foam cup stained brown, yesterday's Liberty Ledger in a grocery sack bulging with granola bars I had assumed I had already eaten. Someone had been nesting 15 feet above my head. Leaning against a rafter sat a small spiral notebook. My first name stretched across the top line in block letters, underlined twice. My pulse drummed so loudly it muffled every other noise. I did not open the notebook. Instead, I backed down the ladder faster than I believed possible, folded the steps upward, and shoved the hatch until the latch clicked shut. Silence pressed in. No footsteps overhead, no cough, only the thud of my own heartbeat. My fingers finally obeyed enough to dial 911. I did not expect a capture, only a uniformed witness who could confirm I was not unraveling. Officers Alvarez and Boone parked at the curb in under 20 minutes. Blue strobes flickered across Nana's rose bushes, making them look electric. I led the officers upstairs, hands trembling hard enough to rattle the flashlight. Boone steadied the ladder while Alvarez vanished into the attic's gloom. The wait stretched longer than seemed reasonable, every second widening. Definitely occupied recently, he finally called. He descended holding the notebook, now open to a sketch of me at the kitchen sink, sleeves rolled, soap bubbles on plates. The drawing was rough yet unmistakable, right down to the crooked bun I coil every morning. No fingerprints, no ID, no intruder. Alvarez guessed a drifter noticed the vacancy months earlier, slipped through an unlocked window, then remained after my arrival, moving only when I left for work. He recited statistics about attic squatters, comparing them to stray cats that discover warm engines. His calm tone chilled me more than the discovery itself. He suggested new locks, floodlights, and an interior camera system. I nodded because words felt brittle in my mouth. I crashed on my friend Sierra's couch across town in Independence for 3 nights while Jenkins' locksmith replaced every deadbolt, installed sash pins on the windows, and fitted a keyed latch over the attic hatch. Motion-activated cameras arrived in brown boxes 2 days later. I mounted one in almost every room, even though the idea of reviewing footage made my stomach flip. When I finally moved back, the disturbances stopped. No hallway lamps glowed without invitation. No breakfast cereal formed military rows. No phantom steam clouded the mirror. Whoever had shared my groceries must have sensed the door was closing. Still, I fall asleep with the television murmuring because silence now feels thinner than paper. The notebook lives in the kitchen junk drawer between spare batteries and expired coupons. Throwing it out seems sacrilegious, like wiping fingerprints off evidence. Sometimes I slide the drawer open, stare at the blue spiral binding, and snap it shut when a cold ripple climbs my arms. The animals at the clinic sensed my frayed edges long after the police left. Kennel dogs paced if I lingered too long near their cages, and cats hissed at reflections no one else could see. A black and white terrier named Hobo refused to settle until I rocked him like a child, whispering that daylight still owns the world. The cameras became an uneasy pastime. At first, I checked the live feed every hour, then only before bedtime, and eventually only after a motion alert. Most pings were moths teasing the infrared LED glow. Once, just after 3 in the morning during a thunderstorm, an alert chimed like an alarm clock inside my dreams. Lightning flashed, and my phone showed the attic camera drowning in static before the screen went black. I lay rigid beneath my blanket until dawn painted the ceiling pink. When I climbed the ladder later that day, the camera wire had been neatly severed. Nothing else seemed disturbed. Now, before lights out, I make my rounds, lock the front door, jiggle each window sash, and tap the attic hatch twice with a broom handle to ensure the padlock sits flush. The hollow click of metal against wood is my lullaby. Routine, I tell myself, costs less than therapy. Almost a year has slipped past. I have shared the whole story with exactly 3 people: Sierra, Mrs. Whitaker, and Dr. Devlin at the clinic. Even so, some evenings I pause at the foot of the stairs, leash in hand, eyes gritty with fatigue, and study the attic hatch for the faint sway of a white cord as fragile as spider silk in an unseen draft. I was renting a skinny duplex on the north side of Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, in late May of 2019, a pocket of time when spring felt as fresh as new paint and summer still waited around the corner. The neighborhood hung in that liminal space between downtown bustle and open farmland, the sort of place where you could hear church bells strike 12 at noon and coyotes sing at midnight. I had signed a 6-month contract with a supply chain startup in Allentown, and the duplex matched every line on my checklist. Cheap, close to Route 22, and miraculously available the same week my pen touched the paperwork. The building itself was a narrow 2-story brick twin with a postage stamp front yard and a chain-link fence that looked ornamental rather than protective. The woman in the adjoining unit, a night shift nurse named Gloria, spent most of her waking hours at St. Luke's or napping at her fiance's place across town. That left my side practically orphaned after dark. I welcomed the solitude. Silence felt like breathing room after long days staring into freight tracking spreadsheets. That particular Saturday moved at a snail's pace. I brewed a second mug of coffee, shuffled clean laundry from washer to dryer, and let a mediocre cooking show dribble from the television while I folded towels. The living room window stood open just wide enough to usher in a breeze that smelled faintly of cut grass and distant lilacs. That was when I first noticed the man across the street. He paced the sidewalk in front of an overgrown vacant lot, pivoting every 20 feet as though the concrete were a balance beam. Every few moments, he glanced up at my duplex, then down at something cupped in his right hand. From my vantage point, it looked like a chunk of dull metal. He wore a sagging denim jacket over a hoodie in weather, pleasant enough for short sleeves. At first, I assumed he was hunting an address or waiting for a ride. But when I stepped outside to shake crumbs from a throw rug, he froze mid-stride and locked eyes with me. No nod, no casual wave, only a blank stare, the kind actors practice while pretending the audience is invisible. Caught off guard, I offered a polite morning. He said nothing, and I retreated inside feeling oddly scolded. 2 minutes later, a hesitant knock rattled my front door. A tap-tap, pause, tap pattern that reminded me of someone testing bathwater. When I opened up, the same man stood on the bottom step, shoulders hunched like he expected sudden rain. His voice sounded far away, as though he were calling from a phone booth instead of 5 feet in front of me. "Hey, did a woman named Melody ever stay here? Maybe Melissa?" Confusion creased his brow. I explained I had only lived there 4 weeks and knew nothing of former tenants. He nodded, though it looked more like a slow tilt of indecision, craned his neck to peer past my shoulder, and murmured, "Right, sure," as if the words had no weight. Then he turned without another syllable and wandered around the corner toward the side entrance that led to our shared laundry room. That single action snared my attention. I stationed myself at the front window, scrolling through my phone while sneaking glances between the blinds. After a minute, the sidewalk was empty. He must have vanished toward Linden Street or slipped behind the duplex. I folded shirts, keeping the television volume low, so every creak from the downstairs floorboards thudded like a kick drum. I locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and wedged a wooden dining chair under the knob, a trick my aunt used in cheap motels. The gesture felt melodramatic, yet it steadied my pulse enough that I could finish the laundry. 20 minutes later, I stood in the kitchen scrubbing a frying pan when a thin metallic scrape rose from the side of the house. It was not loud, just unmistakable. Tool against metal. I let water run over my fingers, telling myself a neighbor was wrestling a bike lock. Still, I crept to the small window by the laundry room and lifted the curtain 2 inches. He was back. Squatting at the side door, shoulders bunched, he levered a tire iron against the latch with practiced rhythm, pushed to test the give, leaned to change the angle. He moved like a handyman executing a routine repair rather than an intruder forcing a lock. Disbelief struck harder than panic. I watched him reposition the iron, jerk again, and saw the entire doorframe flex. I did not bang on the glass. Instinct warned my voice would make me his target. Instead, I backed away on silent feet, snatched my phone, and slipped into the downstairs half-bath, the only room with a bolt on the inside and no window to shatter. Knees hugged to my chest on cool tile, I dialed 911. The dispatcher answered quickly. I whispered my address on Monocacy Street and reported that a man wielding a tire iron was prying my side door. She asked me to stay on the line and describe any sounds. Almost on cue, the crack of splintering wood echoed through the hallway, dry and violent. Then came an eerie hush, as though the entire duplex stopped breathing. No hurried footsteps, no rummaging drawers, just silence so absolute it amplified my heartbeat. The dispatcher remained calm, reminding me officers were en route. I whispered that all was silent until slow footsteps began across the kitchen tile. Each heel fell, paused, and rolled forward with deliberate patience. He was exploring, not fleeing. I pictured him on the other side of the bathroom door, head cocked, deciding which closed room should be opened first. I cupped my free hand over the phone's microphone, muffling any involuntary gasps. Every nerve hummed. The knob never turned, but a delicate brush, as soft as a fingertip following grain, traced the wooden panel. Then nothing. The stillness stretched until time unraveled. The dispatcher said the officers were outside and instructed me to hold position until they announced themselves. Seconds later, a voice thundered from the porch. Bethlehem Police. If anyone is inside, call out. Fear loosened its grip long enough for me to shout. I slid the bolt back, flung the door open, and sprinted into the hall. 2 officers entered through the front, weapons low but ready. They discovered the laundry room door, hanging like a broken jaw. Hinge screws scattered on concrete, yet nothing appeared disturbed or missing. They cleared both floors, checked closets, attic hatch, and crawl space, but the intruder had evaporated. In the living room, I described him. Early 30s, pale, shaved head, cracked lips, purple rings beneath his eyes, denim jacket a few sizes too large. One officer glanced at the other. "Sounds like the trespass guy they keep spotting near Broad Street," he said. "First time we've heard about him forcing entry." They photographed the splintered frame, took my statement, and recommended extra locks, motion lights, maybe a camera. They promised to circulate the description. I texted my friend Caleb, who appeared within an hour bearing takeout and a toolbox. Together, we screwed a heavy strike plate into new lumber, wedged a 2x4 across the inside of the door like a bar, and mounted battery-powered floodlights that illuminated the driveway brighter than a summer matinee. Caleb slept in the recliner while I claimed the sofa, a kitchen knife hidden beneath a folded towel. Every hiss of the radiator jolted me upright. The man never returned, at least while I lived there. Over the next week, I scoured local news sites. I found no arrests resembling him. The landlord told me a Megan had rented 3 years earlier, paid on time, left the unit clean. No Melody, no Melissa. June blurred into July. Project deadlines filled my head, yet I still expected to spot that loose denim jacket at a bus stop or hear a hesitant knock on the door. I installed 2 inexpensive security cameras, one aimed at the side entrance, the other at the porch. Most alerts came from neighborhood cats or the mail carrier. Only one, at 2 in the morning, showed static for a full minute, then an empty porch when the feed recovered. In August, the first broke my lease, citing job uncertainty and personal safety concerns. The landlord grumbled, but accepted because new tenants were ready. I crammed my belongings into a storage unit and couch-surfed until a studio above a bakery in Easton opened, right across from a police substation. Months have slipped by, yet insomnia still drops me into 3M flashbacks. I replay the stranger's precise footfalls, the way he recited unfamiliar names, and how calmly he treated breaking in as if clocking in. The tire iron and the shattered doorframe scare me less than his composure, the certainty that a locked threshold was merely a puzzle he would solve, given patience and leverage. Even in the new apartment with reinforced hardware and a hallway camera feeding directly to my phone, I still wedge a chair beneath the knob each night. Fear roots habits quickly. Occasionally, I pass a thrift store rack and spot a weathered denim jacket. My throat tightens until I confirm the sleeves are too short or the man wearing it smiles with genuine warmth. Only then does the air feel safe enough to breathe again. I had been working from home for about 7 months when this happened. It was mid-October, that stretch of fall when the sandias turn a dusty purple before dinner, and the afternoons in Albuquerque slip into darkness earlier than you think they should. I lived alone on the 3rd floor of a sprawling beige stucco complex off Wyoming Boulevard NE. Every building had a twin, and every breezeway looked cloned. You could hear a neighbor sneeze through the bathroom vent and identify whose dryer was running from the rattle of the lint trap. My days were predictable in a way that felt like a kindness. Zoom calls, coffee on the small balcony facing the parking lot, a load of laundry when the machine sounded free. No pets, no roommates, just me and the laptop. I kept my rent current and my head down. I saw the office staff only when a package played musical chairs at the clubhouse. That day had been boring in the best possible way. A quick check-in call wrapped around 1:30. I set leftover pasta in the microwave and watched the seconds count down. That was when someone knocked. not the doorbell. A knock. 3 sharp, evenly spaced hits. I froze with the microwave humming, because no one was expected, and people in my building usually texted before stopping by. I checked the peephole. A man stood on the landing, late 30s or early 40s, navy polo, clipboard hugged to his chest. Short beard, sunglasses pushed up like a headband, a walkie clipped to his belt. There was a square patch stitched to his shirt, but the fisheye lens turned it into a blur. He must have seen the light change under the door, because he raised his voice just enough to carry. "Hi there, maintenance. We are checking water heaters in Building C. We had a leak in a lower unit." His tone had the polish of repetition. "Quick check, 1 minute." I did not open the door. I asked if he had ID from the leasing office. His face altered by a fraction. The easy smile flattened. "Ma'am," he said, "I am with maintenance. It is a water heater check." The pressure was baked into the words. He was not loud, but he pushed, as if I were creating a problem. "Just open the door so I can get this done," he added, sharper now. My gut finally outweighed my habit of politeness. I told him I would not let anyone in without verifying with the office. He watched the door for a beat too long, said something too low to catch, then walked away. Not hurried, not like a person with urgent work. He drifted down the breezeway and slipped out of the peephole's frame. I stayed where I was for 5 full minutes. Then I slid the deadbolt, set the swing bar I had never bothered with, and realized my hands were shaking a little on the metal. It was not fear exactly, more like adrenaline choosing a cupboard to live in. I called the leasing office. No answer. Lunch hour. I left a voicemail and sent an email so the details existed somewhere more official than my memory. The rest of the afternoon, I did that tired dance between logic and instinct. I peered through the blinds at the lot, listened for footsteps in the hallway, and jumped when a delivery cart rattled past on concrete. Around 4, the property manager called back. Her name was Monica. She sounded like someone juggling 3 tasks while she spoke. I gave her everything I had noticed: height, shirt, sunglasses, the walkie, the patch, his wording. She went quiet for a few seconds and asked me to repeat the part about Building C. When I finished, she exhaled. "We do not have any maintenance scheduled in your building today. None of my guys match what you are describing." She asked me to stop by in the morning to look at camera footage. I said I would. That night, I hardly slept. I left the hallway light on, checked the locks 3 times, and nudged the dresser 2 inches closer to the door, the way I used to in my first studio near UNM. It felt over the top, but I could not stop replaying the push in his voice, the stillness when I asked for ID, the way he did not offer to leave a notice. I kept picturing the straight line the afternoon might have taken if I had unlatched the chain. In the morning, I walked to the office when they opened. Monica had one of the maintenance techs with her, a short guy named Hiro I had seen a few weeks earlier carrying a new dryer up a crowded stairwell. Monica did not waste time. She waved me around the desk toward the security monitor. "You are not the only one," she said, and pressed play. There he was on the screen. Same navy polo, same sunglasses, same clipboard. He walked up to a unit across the courtyard near the pool gate and knocked. He spoke through the door for a minute. He left. Monica scrubbed forward. He did the same thing again at another unit. Then 2 more. All belonged to women who lived alone. Same hour of day, Same building cluster, same script. At one door the lock clicked and the slab opened an inch, then closed. He never tried the handle. The footage showed a neat pattern with nothing you could point to as criminal. Somehow that made it worse. He was careful. No badge to be debunked. No theatrical hard hat. Only the uniform of confidence, the clipboard, the voice designed to make you feel like the obstacle. Monica printed a couple of still frames and said she would send a community notice and had already filed a report with APD after another tenant emailed her that morning. I crossed the courtyard, feeling like the buildings had shifted a few degrees while I was gone. Every hallway noise suddenly carried extra meanings. In the parking lot, one found myself watching people's hands, scanning patches on shirts, tracking faces that looked away a second late. That week I changed the way my door lived. I added a chain lock, installed a doorbell camera pointed down the breezeway, and bought one of those rubber wedges you kick under the door from the inside. I started working from a cafe off Lomas 2 or 3 days a week, so I could hear other people talk and watch a door swing open for someone who was not me. About 3 weeks later, the office emailed the community. Police were still looking for him. They believed the same person had tried similar tactics at 2 complexes off Ubonk and one near Coors within a month. The message repeated the basics. Verify with the office before opening up. Call if you see someone matching the attached photo. I saved the images to my phone. No one replied saying they knew him. He evaporated the way people do when they learn to live near the line and never step over it on camera. That part still needles me. He knew his limits. He knew exactly how long to wait, exactly when to walk. I have lived alone for most of my adult life without thinking too hard about it. That day cracked something I had always taken for granted. My default changed. I keep the chain on even when I am expecting a package. I let calls from the gate box go to voicemail. I learned the names of the maintenance techs who actually work here, and I know which days the truck sits in front of the office. There was no forced entry for me. No wrestling with a door. No confrontation I can hold up as proof when someone asks why it still bothers me. But it does. The cadence of his knock repeats itself at odd hours. I hear the tonal shift when I did not follow the script. I think about the woman who opened her door an inch and then thought better of it. I think about how many small choices happen in apartment hallways that separate a normal afternoon from something you cannot shake. I am writing this for whoever needs permission to be impolite. Trust that first flicker of wrong. If a uniform looks almost right, but not quite, if the words fit but feel off by half a step, you do not owe anyone a polite mistake. Lock the door. Ask for ID. Call the office and wait. The people who belong can prove it without fuss, and the ones who do not usually do exactly what he did. They leave when the script stops working. I live on the far edge of Reno, Nevada, where the city thins out into quiet streets and scrub, and the wind smells like dust and sage after sunset. My place is an older ranch with a low roof line and a laundry room tacked onto the back of the garage like an afterthought. This happened last October, a couple weeks before Halloween, when the grocery stores start filling the front aisles with plastic pumpkins and the evenings tip into cold without asking. I work remote for a logistics company, which is just a fancy way of saying I answer emails in soft pants and drink too much coffee. I have lived alone for 3 years. My ex took a job in Tucson, and I kept the house. It is not big, but it is mine. That night, I had made a skillet dinner and curled up on the couch with a documentary that kept promising it would get interesting any minute. The power went out in the middle of a sentence. No dimming, no warning, just a clean snap to black. I stood there with the remote still pointed at the TV, waiting for the refrigerator's hum to return or the gas furnace to click. Nothing. I went to the front window and peeled the curtain back. The whole street was dark. No porch lights, no glow from smart bulbs behind blinds, not even the traffic signal at the corner of North McCarran and Mayen. The quiet felt wrong, like the neighborhood had taken a breath and forgot to let it out. My phone still had battery, but the signal icon showed a flat line. I thumbed the flashlight on, and it sputtered at half strength. The better flashlight lived in the hallway junk drawer, so I fished that out and headed for the laundry room to check the breakers. I hate going out there at night. It is chilly even in summer, and the spiders treat the corners like a timeshare. I shouldered the creaky door, swept the beam across the dented dryer and the old metal panel, and studied the breakers. Every switch sat exactly where it should. No scorched plastic, no burned smell, no quick fix. I stood there for a moment, the light catching the oval of an empty laundry basket, my own breath fogging a little in the colder air, and something shifted in the corner of my vision. Through the glass pane in the back door, I saw a muted glow in the yard, not a flicker like a dying bulb. A steady, soft pool. Every house on the block was dark. The only thing lit was the motion light mounted near the garage. That one does not need the grid. It has a battery pack. I put it in last winter after someone tried to siphon gas from my car. I clicked my flashlight off and let my eyes adjust. I stepped closer to the window. The silence had a texture to it. I could hear my pulse in my ears. I inched the curtain aside and took a careful look. A man stood just beyond the halo of that light on the shadow side of the garage, facing the house. He did not move. He did not fidget or look around or pat his pockets. He stood like he had arrived at the exact place he intended and only needed the rest of the scene to catch up. Medium height, dark hoodie pulled up, hands loose at his sides. Absolutely still. I crouched under the window and did not move for a long count. I told myself he might be with the utility company. That thought died fast. No truck, no tool belt, no headlamp. And what utility worker stands almost in the dark beside a private garage while the entire street is out? I belly crawled back from the window and sat with my back against the hallway wall, flashlight off, palms sweating. I tried 911 again and got nothing. The little circle spinning at the top of the screen like a joke. I checked the front window. The neighborhood was a void. No car-shaped silhouettes easing along. No neighbors poking heads out to complain. Just black. I considered running to my neighbor's place. Lenore lives 2 doors down and keeps a porch light on like a lighthouse. She was gone that week, up in Kalispell visiting her sister. That meant I had 2 choices I did not like. Stay put or step outside and say something to the person in my yard. I picked a third option. I locked every door, checked every window latch, and slid the little pins into the tracks on the sliders. Then I sat on the floor with my knees to my chest, waiting for my legs to go numb. Time stretched. The motion light clicked off at some point, probably after it decided nothing was moving anymore. I waited past what felt reasonable before I looked again. The yard looked boring. The sagging fence, the wheelbarrow leaning on a flat tire, the thorny rosebush I keep meaning to cut back. No one stood beside the garage. Boredom should have been a relief, but my mind only found new places to land. If he was not where I could see him, where was he? At the side gate, along the wall, waiting on the blind corner by the AC unit for someone to step out and make his night easier. I dragged a heavy dining chair across the tile and wedged it under the back door handle. I sat up until the first gray light touched the windows. A flashlight in one hand and a kitchen knife in the other, because doing something felt better than doing nothing. Every creak from settling studs got a glance and a held breath. When the sky went pale enough that I could see the outline of the pines behind the yard, I started a slow lap from window to window. I checked the side yard from the bathroom. I checked the back again from the laundry room. I stared at the gravel strip along the garage for long enough to convince myself of patterns that were not there. I did not step outside until the sun cleared the rooftops. When I finally did, I went straight for the garage with the flashlight on, even though I did not need it anymore. The side panel on the exterior service box hung open like a loose jaw. Little scratches ran along the lip, fresh enough to catch light. A pair of wire cutters sat half buried in the mulch by the condenser. The handles were cheap rubber, and the jaws were nicked. I did not touch them. I backed away and locked the door behind me and walked to the front of the house to coax my phone into finding a bar of service. When a single dot finally appeared, I made the call. The first officer arrived in under half an hour. He looked like a rookie until he started talking, like those young faces you only trust after they start using the right words. Officer Rivas, Reno PD. He took one look at the open panel and the cutters and said, in that calm tone cops use when they want to keep you steady, that someone had done this on purpose and knew what they were doing. He explained that if you understand which wires carry what, killing power to a single house is not complicated. People will pull a meter or snap a main if they have enough nerve. The point is not to wreck the place. The point is to see if anyone walks out. If no one does, they come back or they keep going. He bagged the cutters with gloved hands and had me point out where I saw the man stand. He asked about cameras, and I shrugged at the timing. Every hardwired system on the block had gone out with the outage. Mine too. The only thing that worked was the battery motion light. The unsettling part came after he made a couple radio calls. There had been no planned outage. No windstorm strong enough to flip a line. The utility had no notice on my grid and no crews in the area. So either a freak failure happened at the exact moment someone decided to test my yard, or someone created the conditions they wanted. He did not commit to either explanation out loud. He kept glancing toward the service box, like the story might appear in the metal if he looked long enough. I made a list that week and paid for all of it without arguing. I swapped the locks. I hired a handyman to install a steel back door that takes a thumb turn from the inside and laughs at a credit card. I added a hasp to the service panel and a lock that cannot be snipped without waking up the entire street. I'd put battery cameras where the wires do not reach. And I went to the Washoe County shelter and met a black lab, mixed with soft eyes who thudded his head against my leg and sealed the deal in 10 seconds. His shelter name was Hercules. He looks more like a moose, so moose is what he got. I sleep differently now. I do not mean worse every night, just differently. There is a part of my brain that patrols while the other parts try to rest. I check the motion light battery twice a month. I plug the big flashlight in after I use it, so I never find it half dead. Sometimes I wake up around 3 and sit on the edge of the bed and watch the backyard. I wait for the light to bloom and for a shape to take form beside the garage the way it did that night. It has not, but I know what it means if it does. Officer Rivas called a few days later to say the lab did not find prints on the cutters. No hits on DNA. Nothing on my street cameras or the neighbors after power came back. The report turned into a line in a database that probably reads like a dozen other lines. Attempted power cut. No entry, no suspect. The kind of thing you tell yourself is random because the alternative collects interest inside your chest. I keep thinking about the practical parts. Whoever was out there knew where the service disconnect sat. They knew where the blind spots were between lights. They stood just outside the spill of the one lamp they could not kill and watched the house like it was a test they had taken before. They knew I was alone. That part sticks. You do not stand that still for that long. Beside the garage of a house you do not already know something about. A week after everything, I took Moose for a long loop past the little park on Robb Drive and tried to let my shoulders come down. Kids were playing tag in the dry grass, and a dad kept slicing a plastic bat through the air while a toddler wobbled after foam balls. The ordinary noise helped. So did the sense that I could choose which part of the story to keep. I cannot control what knocked the power out or who watched my house from the dark. I can control the hinges and bolts and lights and alarms, and the fact that someone now barks when a leaf thinks too hard about the porch. I do not tell this for pity. I write it down the way you label a breaker, so you know what it does when the room goes dark. If your gut says a situation is wrong, treat it like a fire alarm. Lock the door. Ask for proof. Be a little rude. You do not owe access to anyone who cannot prove they belong. If the light in your yard snaps on during a blackout and shows you a man who thinks stillness is the same as invisibility, believe what the picture is telling you. Someone out there is testing for an easy house. Make sure yours is not the one they pick. It happened on a Thursday night in mid-October, a little before midnight, right after I stepped out of the shower. I remember because I was still thumb scrolling through an email from work, debating if I should answer now or let it rot until morning. I live alone in a single-story house in a quiet pocket of Westerville in Ohio, tucked at the end of a cul-de-sac where the mailboxes lean and neighbors wave without learning your last name. No deliveries expected, no visitors, nothing on the calendar except sleep. The knock came soft at first. 3 quick raps. I froze, towel draped over my shoulders, and waited to see if I imagined it. It came again, a shade louder, the same rhythm. I pulled on sweatpants, padded to the front door, and stood behind the frosted glass that turns people into blurry cutouts. There was definitely someone on the porch. I did not open the door. I called through it, keeping my voice steady, asking what they needed. A man answered. He said he had a food delivery for someone named Logan. His tone was casual, in a way that did not fit the hour. I told him he had the wrong house. He paused, then asked if I could open the door and check the receipt. The request landed hard. I felt something in my chest tighten. I said no. I repeated that nobody named Logan lived there, and I had not ordered anything. He stayed planted for a few seconds and knocked once more, slower this time, like a teacher waiting out a student. I stepped to the side, stole a glance through the peephole, and saw a man in a gray hoodie with a baseball cap low, a paper bag in one hand. No uniform, no branded thermal bag, no company logo on the receipt that I could not see anyway. I told him he needed to leave. He did not argue. He stood there 10 more seconds, turned, and walked away. I waited. A minute, then 2. I lifted the blind in the front room. The street looked empty. No car idling, no dome light glow, no open trunk that a driver would fuss with. Even when delivery drivers are wrong, they do not hover like that, and they definitely do not walk off without a car in sight. I told myself it was a mix-up that would make sense in daylight, then grabbed my phone off the kitchen counter and opened my doorbell app to make sure I was not overreacting. The clip loaded. At first, it looked exactly like I expected. A man near his mid-30s, average build, gray hoodie, cap, paper bag, eyes flicking toward the door like he was rehearsing. Then a faint movement touched the bottom corner of the frame. I paused and scrubbed back a few seconds. There it was. A second man crouched low on the right side of the porch, tucked tight to the step where the camera barely caught him. Black clothing head to toe. He held himself so still, he almost disappeared into the shadow. Only the shift of his weight gave him away. At one point, his hand slid toward his jacket, then stopped, frozen mid-reach, while the first man kept talking on cue. The crouched one never moved toward the door. He waited in that gap where a peephole cannot see and a side window cannot help. If I had cracked the deadbolt and opened the door 6 inches, he would have been a foot from the threshold. The realization hit like cold water. I sat down on the edge of the couch and let the footage loop. The second figure had been there the entire time. I had been speaking through the door. My voice had marked my position for both of them. I replayed everything in my head. Had they watched the house first? Had they learned my routine? Or were they moving down the block, trying doors until something opened? I scrubbed the timeline back an hour. Nothing. No car rolling into frame. No slow pass in front of my driveway. Just the knock at 11:45. Then the pitch about the wrong name. When the first man finally turned from the door, the one in black unfolded to full height and followed. They walked side by side down the driveway. No conversation picked up on the mic, no glance at each other, no hurry. The two figures reached the end of the sidewalk and slipped past the edge of the camera's field like a pair of ghosts. No license plate to give. No neat detail to anchor the suspicion. Just 2 men, one visible, one hidden, both counting on the door to open. I did not sleep. I sat on the couch with a baseball bat across my lap, and the lights on, every lock turned, the blinds pulled tight. Each time a leaf scraped the siding, my shoulders locked. Morning arrived with garbage trucks and a dog barking 3 houses down, as if the night had been ordinary. I saved the clip to a USB drive and drove it to the Westerville Police Division after lunch. The officer who took my statement introduced himself as Officer Graff. He had the calm manner of someone who has watched hours of grainy clips like mine. He leaned over the desk, pressed pause when the second man came into view, and let out a short breath through his nose. He said they had been seeing more versions of this. One person knocks and keeps you focused. A second waits for the moment you unchain the door or turn your head. Sometimes it is a quick theft. Sometimes it becomes something worse. He filed the report, asked me to email the raw file to his case number, and advised me to add a second camera that covered the angle my first one missed. I booked a same-week appointment with a local electrician. Motion lights went up along the walkway and over the driveway. I added a second camera pointed to the side yard and started locking the glass storm door for the first time since I moved in. I changed nothing else about my schedule, except the part where I never answer the door unless I am expecting someone and can verify them through the app or a call to the company. The part that stuck with me was how little there was to hang a conclusion on. No plates, no car, no clear face, no name. The fake order for Logan was probably a throwaway. It did not feel random. It felt practiced. It also lasted 5 minutes at most, and still managed to bend the way my house feels at night. When the doorbell rings after dark now, my whole body answers before I do. About a week later, Officer Graff called back. They had circulated stills internally and to a few nearby agencies. No hits. He told me to keep the file backed up and to call if anyone returned. He sounded like he meant it, and also like he knew how often these cases thin out and vanish. I have lived alone low enough to be comfortable with silence. After that night, silence sounds different. I notice where the porch light throws shadows and where it does not. I notice how footsteps on the sidewalk echo at 9 p.m. versus 2 a.m. I notice how a knock at the wrong time can feel like a suggestion instead of a question. It has been close to a year. Nothing else has happened. No suspicious doorbell rings. No late-night knocks. The cameras send me clips of raccoons and delivery drivers who actually wear company vests. Still, when I scroll the app and see an empty porch in black and white, I think about that second figure tucked out of sight, how he waited for me to make his job easy. I am writing this because it is easy to assume every knock is harmless if you grew up in neighborhoods where people used to borrow sugar without texting first. That is not how it works anymore. There are little scripts that thrive on politeness, the wrong address, the name that sounds familiar in a hurry, the request to see a receipt you cannot read through wood anyway. If you live alone, especially on a quiet street like mine, do not reward the script. Check before you open. Look at the camera. Ask for the company name and call the number yourself. Use the chain. Lock the storm door. Tell them to leave the bag on the step if they insist it is yours. The people who belong can prove it. The ones who do not will do exactly what those two did on my porch. They will wait in the dark for you to do the wrong thing and drift away when you do not. Late September, I was still in a small one-story rental in Round Rock, Texas, just off Mays Street, where the traffic hums until dinner and the sprinklers take over after dark. I had just crawled out of a long relationship that burned through everything I had: money, patience, and whatever practical energy I used to keep for fixing loose cabinet hinges and humming outlets. The house had a list of little problems I kept ignoring. The most irritating one was the sliding glass door on the back patio. The lock jammed, the frame stuck, and if you tugged it a certain way, the whole thing would pop open an inch. I kept wedging a cheap security bar into the track like I was child-proofing my life. Then I finally decided to hire someone who knew what he was doing. I went with Craigslist because I was broke and because it felt like there might be one decent needle in that haystack if I dug long enough. After scrolling past a parade of blurry drill photos and flexed biceps, I found a listing from a guy named Cal that looked surprisingly legit. He had clear before and after pictures, a list of prices by task, and an actual license number typed out instead of a promise in all caps. I messaged him. He replied that night. He was polite and to the point. He said he could swing by the next afternoon at noon. No upsell, no strange requests. I said yes. Cal looked like a guy you would see repairing a neighbor's fence and forget 5 minutes later. Early to mid-40s, tall, shaved head, a farmer's tan etched into his forearms, and a pair of beat-up work boots that had lived a hard life. He wore a leather tool belt that clinked when he walked. He talked just enough to explain without filling the air for the sake of it. He pulled the door off its track, replaced the locking mechanism, cleaned and lubed the rollers, and sprayed the frame where it had started to seize. He pointed out rust blooming at the bottom seal and offered a quick patch so it would not spread. The whole thing took 45 minutes. When he left, I slid the door shut and heard a clean metal click. I thought maybe Craigslist was not the disaster everyone said it was. That night I made a simple dinner and flopped onto the couch with a beer and put on John Carpenter's The Thing, because tension disguised as comfort is still comfort. The new lock clicked cleanly when I shut up for the night. No more plastic bar in the track like a yardstick in a hotel door. By 10:30 I was still in the living room, lights down, just me and the television glow. That was when I heard it. Not glass, not a thump, just that precise little sound of the slider shifting against the frame. I paused the movie and sat up. I stared into the dark kitchen, because you always do that before you stand, convinced your ears invented it. Then a draft ghosted across my ankle. I stood slowly, careful not to scrape the bar stool, and moved toward the kitchen. The lights were off, but moonlight from the sink window outlined what I needed to see. The slider was cracked open a few inches. The brand new lock sat undone. No shattered pane, no bent latch. Whoever did it knew where to press and how to lift. It was quiet like a trick learned by heart. My heart started pounding as if it was trying to get out of the way of my hearing. I eased the door shut and set the new lock again. I dropped a broomstick into the bottom track because muscle memory does not retire easily. I walked through the house with the quiet of a person who already knows they will not find what they fear. Bathroom empty. Bedrooms fine. Hall closet undisturbed. The street out front was dead. Porch lights, none. Cars, none. Specificity nagged me. That door was the only thing touched that day. I thought about Cal's easy silence, and for the first time, it felt less like courtesy and more like control. I pulled out my phone and opened the app for the cheap motion cam I had mounted over the patio a month ago for raccoons and package theft. I scrolled to the last event and my stomach turned. At 10:27 p.m., right when I had heard the sound, the camera caught someone on the patio. The clip was grainy and the darkness ate plenty of detail, but there was enough left to see. Same build as Cal, same stride. He was not in the light gray work shirt from earlier. He wore a dark hoodie, jeans, gloves, no tool bag, no drill. He stood in front of the door and did not fumble like a burglar testing a guess. He went straight to the bottom corner, crouched, and the door moved a sliver before the clip ended. He knew the spot because he had created it. I did not sleep. I sat on the couch with a kitchen knife within reach and left the exterior lights on. Every sound inflated into something it was not. A backfire on Louis Henna Boulevard might as well have been outside my fence. I replayed the clip until my thumb hurt. He never looked into the camera lens. He moved like repetition, confident and efficient. I wanted to call the police. I also wanted to hand them more than a feeling and a silhouette. I started splitting hairs with myself. Could it be someone who just happened to know how to lift that lock? Could it be a coincidence? Deep down, I knew. Nobody randomly masters a specific fix on a door that was rebuilt hours before. I woke up angry and cautious. Instead of filing a report first, I tested him. I used a burner number and texted Cal as if I were a new client who needed a window lock fixed as soon as possible. He replied in 10 minutes, polite as ever, asked for an address, and I gave him a decoy 2 blocks away. I parked across the street with the engine off and watched. At 12:14 p.m., a white Toyota Tacoma rolled up. Cal got out wearing the same neutral uniform and the same tool belt. The difference was in the way he scanned the front of the house, like he was cataloging more than a job. He knocked. He waited. Then he drifted along the side of the place to peek through a gate like he wanted to be sure nobody was home. That was enough. I took stills from the patio video, saved the text thread, and drove to the Round Rock police lobby on North Maze. The officer who took my statement listened with the kind of skepticism that feels like a habit until you put the laptop in front of him. He watched the clip, paused at the crouch, then rewound without me asking. He did not promise an outcome. He said they would look into the license number and see what they could see. I sent the original file to his case email. Then I reported the Craigslist ad. A week later, it stopped appearing under that name. Whether it vanished for good or just popped up with a new phone number, I cannot tell you. I went further than I wanted with the house. I paid for a new slider with a reinforced frame and anti-lift brackets. I added a keyed pin into the style so the panel locks into the header and cannot be lifted even if the primary latch fails. I put deadbolts on the front and back doors that lock from the inside with a thumb turn and have no exterior keyway to fish. For a while, I did not sleep alone. A friend from work crashed on my couch a few nights each week so I could get used to the house again. The list of what-ifs stayed busy anyway. I kept seeing the way Cal looked around when he thought I was focused on his hands. I kept seeing how he stood out of frame for most of the afternoon and made small talk like filler. The part that sticks under my skin is not theft. He did not snatch a wallet or try a smash and grab. He did not even push it the first night. He tested the door like people rehearse, then left. Maybe the clean click when I shut made him hesitate. Maybe the TV flash spooked him. Maybe he planned to come back on a night when the patio light was off and I had finally stopped listening for every bump. It has been a year. I moved to a different side of Williamson County, closer to Old Settlers Park and the sound of baseball games drifting from Dell Diamond when the wind is right. I got a better camera system that covers the yard in overlapping angles. I put motion lights along the fence line, not just on the roof line. I stopped hiring strangers from classifieds for anything that touches a lock or a frame. It feels paranoid when I write it out. It feels like common sense at midnight. Sometimes I wake up before dawn and check the app out of habit. The yard sits empty in grayscale. A cat crosses the concrete. A possum waddles behind the grill. The slider's new locks sit tight. Then I remember how easily someone who shook my hand in daylight, who laughed at a rust stain and gave me a price that fit my thin wallet, came back hours later with gloves on and a hood pulled up, convinced that a door he fixed belonged to him if he wanted it badly enough. If you live alone and you are tempted to save a few dollars by letting a stranger rebuild the thing that separates inside from outside, do what I did not do soon enough. Verify the license number with the state, not just a listing. Pay with a method that gives you a trail. Stand in the doorway while they work and learn the names of every part they touch. Watch where they look when they think you are not watching. Move your camera so it sees the corner they will see. And if anything about your gut says this person will remember your house long after the invoice clears, believe it. Replace the door. Replace the lock. Replace the habit of giving the benefit of the doubt to someone who understands that 6 quiet inches in the dark are all the invitation they need. Dear folks, thank you so much for enjoying tonight's stories. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel. This way, you keep the darkness coming. Until next time.